let's cozy up with a bowl of something delicious. We're making pasta alla boscaiola, which is so delicious, so hearty, so rich, and so wonderful. It livens up these cold January days of February. I don't even know what day we're at, okay? January feels like it's been 17 months long. So here we are, we're making a beautiful pan of pasta alla boscaiola. Boscaiola is a sort of a classic traditional sauce made with lots of mushrooms. Boscaiola is forager in Italian. You forage for mushrooms, you make the sauce. Now, there are many different varieties of recipes for the sauce. I make the sauce 3 different ways. I make it one way where it's a white cream base. I make another way where there's no cream, all wine, still mushrooms and sausage. And then there's this way, which I think is universally loved, which is a mix of all of them. It's got a little bit of red sauce, it's got a little bit of cream, it has a little bit of wine, and all together makes for a really rich and wonderful sauce. Even household to household, people cook differently in Italy. So there are different versions of this recipe. Does not mean one's better than the other. It just means that there are different ways of doing this. Traditionally, there's always an element of pork. Some people will use pancetta or guanciale. I always use sausage because I think it gives you really lovely salty bits, but this is not a sausage and mushroom sauce. This is a mushroom sauce with a little bit of sausage or a little pancetta, whatever. I'm using 2 links of sausage here. I'm making a smaller batch. I'm not making a huge batch of this, but I'm just gonna crumble up my sausage. I've got a link of hot and a link of sweet. You could do all hot, all sweet, whatever you desire. I'm just crumbling it up in my large skillet with a little bit of extra virgin olive oil. Make sure you remove the casing. You don't need the casing. I've got some boiling water. To my boiling water, I'm adding dry porcini mushrooms. Now, in a very idyllic world, okay, you're in the woods. I'm gonna put this back on the heat very low, like 5 minutes. They're gonna rehydrate. In a wonderful, idyllic world, you're in the forest, you're hanging out, you're going with your friends, maybe you have a dog with you. Oh, look at that, beautiful wild mushrooms. We got porcini mushrooms, we got all kinds of wild mushrooms. You'd pick them, you'd come home, and you'd make this dish with a variety of beautiful woodsy mushrooms. In reality, ShopRite says, I don't think so. Best I can do is some Cremini mushrooms, okay? Which means I have to get that deep flavor somewhere, and the easiest way to get that is through dry porcini mushrooms. They're very deep and woodsy and delicious. I will never be able to find them fresh where I live. If I'm lucky and I go to Manhattan, I can probably find them in Italy, but they're also gonna cost an entire mortgage. So what do? I use dry porcini mushrooms, let them reconstitute in boiling water. I boil them for a few minutes and then I'll let them sit for like 10 minutes. You're gonna get a really rich stock, which we will add to this because it's gonna add to that deep woodiness, and it's gonna work out just fine. With that, I'm gonna use Cremini mushrooms, also known as baby bellas. Make sure you clean them well. And once you do, you see these really small ones? These small ones you can basically just cut in half. The little bigger ones, you can just cut them in half and cut into little slices like so. If you're lucky enough to get a good mix of wild mushrooms, maybe some shiitakes, maybe some oyster mushrooms, use a good variety. But like I said, to please everyone, this is what I can find in my local grocery store, and I'm pretty certain that you can find them too, even if you have to outsource the dry porcini mushrooms and overnight them if you're ordering them online, which I do all the time. It just seems to be like the easiest way for me to make this dish that just tastes really good and delicious and doesn't make it too difficult to get all the ingredients. My sausage is looking good. I want it crispy and nibbly. I also need to break it up more as it cooks, and once it's fully cooked, I'm gonna set it aside and I'm just gonna chop up my mushrooms and my onion. Onions and mushrooms go right in, cranking the heat up a little bit. You can also use shallot if you don't want to use an onion, a little more mild, which is lovely. Sometimes I do. Most of the time I have onions on hand. That's what I use. I'm just gonna saute that up. I need a little pinch of salt, not too much. I'm just gonna let these cook down and saute, develop some color, do really wonderful, beautiful things. In the meantime, there's a couple things I'm gonna do. One of them is I'm going to finely mince a couple cloves of garlic, get that ready. I'm gonna take the porcini out of the hot water and I'm gonna give them a nice chop. I'm also gonna reserve about a half a cup or so for this amount of the porcini stock and get that aside. You wanna make sure you're not picking the very bottom of the pot of stock because that's where all the grit settles and you don't want that. You don't want that sandy grit in your final dish. So I'm gonna set the garlic aside, my rosemary, I'll chop that up with the garlic. Want a little rosemary action in there, really adds to the flavor profile. Remember, rosemary, mushrooms, best friends, love each other. By the way, cameraman for sale. If any of you are looking for a cameraman, mine is for sale, okay? The man doesn't understand I'm trilingual, okay? I speak 3 languages. So sometimes if some of my words make no sense, like I was supposed to say ideally, not idyllic, he won't let me like live that down. I have to correct it so that people don't make fun of me. Ideally, you're in the woods and you're foraging for mushrooms. But in my world, idyllic, you're not in the woods because you're scared, so you go to ShopRite instead. That's it. Add the garlic and rosemary. Give it like a second, then it marries with the mushrooms and it just smells heavenly in here. That is beautiful. I honestly could just deglaze this with a little cognac, a little cream, and it would be a fantastic steak topper. Lots of black pepper, and that would be really sensational. Give that garlic and rosemary a minute to bloom and for that raw garlic flavor to cook out. A little wine, you know? Because why not? Don't whine about it. If you don't want to add any wine, you can just skip it and add just like another ladleful of that porcini stock and it'll be delicious. Don't let it reduce too much or you're going to lose a lot of the flavor. Now, tomato product. I'm using some sauce that I already had made. You can use a can of crushed tomatoes, a can of diced tomato, a can of fire roasted tomato. There's so many different things that you could use. I just wouldn't use something that's like got like spices in it for obvious reasons. Add your sausage back in. Add your porcini mushrooms that have been nicely chopped right back in. Your stock. That's going to provide really lovely depth and gorgeousness. Beautiful. Ah, that already smells fantastic. Now my sauce, because it's already cooked, doesn't need to cook too long. I'm gonna give this a few minutes to all cook together along with some heavy cream. This is gonna add really luxe, creamy vibes. It is quite traditional to add some cream in this dish if you're making this version of it, so don't let that scare you. You're only gonna add a drizzle of it. Stir that in. It should be like a really lovely blush sauce. Let that simmer a bit, along with a little bit of salt and black pepper. And I'm gonna cook my pasta nice and al dente. When that's done, I will meet you back here to cook everything together, unite everything, add a little cheese, add a little green, and it is perfection. So just let this simmer. Sauce is perfect. Just increase the heat a little. I'm using pappardelle. Pappardelle is a really lovely traditional shape to use with any kind of ragu or any kind of heavier, rich sauce. I would also love a paccheri with this, which I know is a little controversial because not everyone likes that shape, but I adore it. You can also do rigatoni if you want to. Tagliatelle would be great, but this to me is truly fantastic. I just want to grab a ladle because of course I need to hit this with a little starchy water, help bring everything together. And you always want to take that pasta out a couple minutes shy of being ready so that you can cook it all together and give it a chance to really absorb all of those flavors. Now, of course, crank that heat up, okay? We like to party in here. We like to party. The starchy water is also salty, so it's well seasoned. You need some green. I'm using parsley. Basil is also great here. I actually can't seem to find really good basil at the grocery store. I guess it's just the time of year. And I'm waiting for, very not patiently waiting for my garden to be ready. Lots of cheese. And now it's nice to just give everything a chance to cook together, the pasta to absorb all those gorgeous flavors. And look at that sauce. Boscaiola should be quite saucy. I don't like very dry pasta no matter what I'm making. Just gonna give it a minute and then we taste test, babe. It is just so gorgeous. Look at that. Look how rich and creamy that sauce is. Don't panic, it's just two of us for a late lunch, early dinner. So we're gonna eat straight out of the pan because of course we are. Hot though. If you don't make this week, you're really missing out. It's rich, it's creamy, it's got depth. It's also bright because I've got that wine in there. So it's adding a nice little layer of, you know, like that crispness that a little bit of acid adds to a dish. It's perfection. Go to laurainthekitchen.com for the written recipe. I hope you enjoy spending time with me. Must make it. You will love it. And I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye. So good.